All right. Welcome to the stream. My name's Random Hamilton. I am a artist, illustrator, concept developer, creative, stay-at-home dad, and streamer. Welcome to the stream. Happy to have you here. Today we are doing, actually we're going to do a test real quick because from the sounds of it, it sounds like I can go ahead and pin comments into the top channels. We're going to try this functionality out real quick. So this is to test the pin function. Okay, so I should, oh, it totally works. Can I pin it over here? Ah, that sucks. So how do I add? So where does that pin show up? This is to test the pin functionality. Okay. I don't think that's quite working. But you know, what are you going to do? Okay. So, there we go. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to figure out exactly how to make this pin functionality work because I think I would really like you guys to be able to see the oh, you know what? I bet I did it. I didn't do it here. Let's do this. We're going to add this. We're going to add the chat highlight. Yes, add source. Chat highlight. Add a new source instead. Okay, no chat highlight. We're going to add this one. Add source. Hey, there we go. This is to test a pin. All right. So that works there. I wonder if I'm going to be able to do that on the multi-stream. Because the problem with that I have right now is that I have no way to let you guys see what somebody else says. So this might be a way for us to do this. We'll see. Let's play it by ear. All right. So today we're going to go ahead and we're going to be kicking off our inks on our flower dragon. I have taken a ridiculous amount of photos of this because I have kind of vacillated on where I wanted to go with it. Initially, I was thinking that this would be something that I would just do in pencil. But the more I started working on it, the more I started recognizing that I actually wanted to take it in a few directions. Yeah, bub. Can I help you? Okay, what's up? First off, I need to see if I took enough pictures of this thing in a high-res quality that I can do a digital painting of it. That was one of my original real goals. Yeah, there's enough here. Because before I do inks, I want to make sure that I have captured a good enough picture so that I can take this to a digital painting because I think this might be a really nice piece for a digital painting candidate. And that's usually how I approach if I'm going to be doing digital painting. What I'll usually do is I will go through and I will attempt to develop the sketch. And then from that point, before I really commit to inks, I might just want to take it to a painting. And the reason for that is because I really want to make sure that I am giving myself as much room to explore these ideas without completely overdoing or underdoing my work. It's just a thing. It's something I like to do personally to make sure that I'm staying on top of my just give myself as many options. Because the moment you put ink down, it becomes a lot harder to utilize the forms underneath it. And not only that, but when you're working from digital to ink and then back and forth, you start limiting the opportunities for you to utilize just the different techniques of layering. It complicates it, right? So if I go with inks and then I scan my picture and then I start painting over the top of it, the ink work really is something you put maybe on a multiply layer over the top of all your colors. But then you have to clean up your inks, right? Because then you can't have all the artifacts of all the dustness of all the pencil. You can still do that, but it only if you're really intending on that to be a very specific approach to the way that you're creating your piece up. So it just adds a complication, adds a wrinkle. I personally like to keep my pencils and ink versions separate from my digital versions. Not because there's anything wrong with that for the cross-play between, but I just don't find any self-gratification in trying to focus on doing everything on the same piece. I might as well just separate them out, and then I can get two different tonalities and two different stories out of the same piece of work. Because again, we talked about this last week, and I think we've talked about this a lot, but in general, when it comes to, when it comes to being able to have like multiple voices on your in your piece, you know, it's just about trying to make sure that you go with the method that makes the most sense to you as far as your accommodation and what you're comfortable with. So, hey, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you here. My name is Brandon Hamilton. I am an illustrator, artist, stay-at-home dad, and creative and streamer. Today we're going to be working on the inks for our piece here. This is the flower dragon piece we sketched out last week. I am currently just making sure my chats are up so people can fully interact. Let's mute that, please. Let's bring up our chat here. So I can't. How do I add my YouTube chat to my OBS? Sorry, guys. I'm still kind of learning how this stuff works together. So if it comes off that I'm a little amateurish, because I am, I'm gonna have to find out how to add more chats to my chat bar here. Recent views, remote channel, followers on chat, slow mode, pause chat, scroll only. There should be no pause. Okay. I'll figure this out later. I'm sure there's a way that I can go ahead and have multiple chats here for the different. Okay, so let's unpin that. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get cracking. Let's see if we can do this. All right. So to kick things off, let's figure out where we're going to start. You know, there's this in a piece like this. There's a lot of area to cover, right? I personally try to start around my center focus of the piece because it lets me kind of just get some stuff out of the way. It lets me really clearly define. The centerpiece and the key characters. It also lets me go ahead and just make sure that I lock in exactly how I want to use the ink. You know, and that's a big thing. It's a big thing to kind of start looking at, okay, where am I going to, or like what's the aesthetic I'm going for with this inking. And so that's really what we're going to shoot for right now, is just figuring that out. I'm going to start with a Bic pen, and you always have a piece of paper that you can do your cleanup on. I like to start with a Bic pen because it's soft, and I can always go forward. And I'm just going to start working on our main character here. Super sweet character. She is quite happy to be introducing tea to the dragon. This was a character suggestion by my viewers. My wife had asked me to do kind of a nicer piece, involve flowers, and I had kind of posed that question to the channel, and I had my niece and nephew on, and they had suggested a steampunk girl and her in this flower world, and that kind of introduced the idea of her steampunk friend, her little robot that she built, and then that kind of introduced the whole setting, and so we just kind of ran with it. So, you know, you'll notice that I'm not going crazy as far as like trying to really hash in a lot of information. I'm actually keeping it very light. I'm keeping it very specific and tactical. And the reason for that is because I want to be able to demonstrate and put through, like, that you don't have to go super heavy on your inks, because inks are just a finite medium. They're a medium that has kind of a point where you just can't go any farther. So understanding what that line is, and then allowing yourself the room to really play with just how much ink you pack in, how much visual like noise you pack in, is really ideal. And so we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this guy down. Pull that guy around. Alright, so far it looks like that's showing up nicely. Good. Alright. 1 second, I need to check and make sure that I am streaming on Facebook properly real quick. 1 second, please. go to my video. Because I should be showing my direct page. Sorry about this, y'all. It's kind of part of the process of getting your stuff working. String. Hey, welcome to the channel. Good to have you here. My name is Brandon Hamilton, illustrator, artist, creative, stay-at-home dad, all the above. And today we are kind of crushing along on a new piece we started last week. Our little steampunk young lady with her robot in a flower garden with a flower dragon. I know, a little out there. You know, that's fun. And we're just kind of laying in the initial pens with a Bic and kind of letting ourselves just kind of play. You know, when I lay down pencils, I really, as much as I try to be descriptive, I try not to be too descriptive. I don't want to force myself into a very limited kind of like track of creativity, because when you're drawing with a pen versus drawing with a pencil, just so many other things occur in the process of that drawing that can be really exciting. And if you've done a bunch of pencil work, then you kind of feel conflicted to like fully embrace and follow what the pen's taking you to do. And that might sound a little silly, but for those of you who've taken the time to really just allow yourselves to just draw with a pen and a pencil, you'll or if you haven't done that yet, give yourself some opportunities to do that. Even if you think you're not very good with a pen, which I think is a very common sentiment. For a lot of people, they feel very uncomfortable with the idea of drawing with a pen because it's like no backsies. You can't really return. But, you know, in a lot of ways, that's actually okay. Because if you just allow the pen to, you know, illustrate as you go. And what I mean by that is you're not trying to be perfect. You're just drawing and allowing the pen to move with your hand. If you can accept the results that come from that, it's quite amazing how much more your pen art will be very comfortable. And so it really is just about giving yourself as much room as you can to embrace what happens on the page. You know, all of the marks you see me put down, I've already, in just this time we've been talking, where I've been working with doing her hair outline, I've had several spots where I'm like, oh, crap, didn't mean to do that. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Oh, didn't mean to do that. You know, and that's very common because pens and pencils simply move on the paper differently. The tooth of the paper really does dictate quite a lot of where a pen goes. And with a pencil, you know, you may be pressing lighter, you may be going with a more of an angle. Like, pencil drawing is so vastly different than pen drawing because even the way you hold the pencil and the pen can be quite different. And so you got to kind of give yourself room to just kind of enjoy the different results you get from them, and that really will make you feel a lot more comfortable in using these different mediums. Now, you still may prefer to use pencil, and there are absolutely times where I absolutely prefer to use pencil, but in this case, I think a pen is going to be really, really good for getting us where we need to go. I've gone ahead and created some really basic subtle line work here for different things. We got her little wrench. Okay, this is something I do want to cover. If you're working in pen and you intend, hey, Bubba. Hi, Alfie. Mwah. What's going on with Alfie? Oh, did you spill milk on Alfie? Where's your milk? Did you spill milk on the couch? Where's your milk? Okay. One moment, please. Be right back. Sorry about that. Thank you for the wait. This is just one of the realities of being a stay-at-home dad and doing a stream. Sometimes you got to step away. Luckily, the whole house behind me is the playpen. So, all right. So we are just getting the wrench kind of keyed in. Again, I'm not trying to go crazy hard here. And what you're seeing here, you may see like little inconsistencies as far as roundness of a certain element, or maybe it'll feel very loose, and that's still okay because I try to keep my pen work fairly loose until I have to fully commit. And what I mean by loose is, you can't do much about putting a line down in paper. It's going to leave a mark. But what you can do is you can go ahead and leave yourself, try to keep the lines thin, try to keep the lines really kind of as more border shapes. Because what I'm trying to do is, as I'm adding the pen, I'm starting to add the personality. I made some pencil lines and I laid down a certain detail, like indicating that there's like some cloth holding this wrench. But I certainly didn't make any of the internal lines that would offer any texture or kind of justify the structure of that cloth. So it's really just about making sure that if I put a line down, I don't then have to try to fix it. I don't have to do any more work to make that an understandable space. One second here, I'm going to see if I can get my phone. Back, sorry about that. Alright. So we're just getting our general forms in. We're making sure that it just kind of makes sense scale-wise. It's not the sexiest part of doing these kind of pieces, is this kind of early stage. But in my opinion, and some artists can do this by nature. Some artists are working on a style or a piece or an approach that's so comfortable that they can just bust it out. And they're all over it. They're on YouTube, they're on Twitch. For me, this is kind of more of a not currently practiced style, a little lighter, a little more cartoony and friendly. So it's something that I'm just taking my time with because I would really love to develop this so that I can actually lean in this a little bit more. 1 second, please. Alright, thank you. Okay, so we're kind of laying in our structure, we're laying in the individual pieces. You'll notice that all I'm really trying to do here is I'm really trying to just get into the space where these details, from an immediate glance, you kind of know exactly what they are. Now, do you need to know what those are specifically? No, but it only makes sense that if we're going to put little pouches on her belt, that they have some kind of purpose. And we're just getting the little wrinkles. Knee in here. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and ink the bottom of her knees in because I actually want the ground to kind of break up her silhouette. I want the details of the ground to kind of be the thing that nestles her in. And that will allow us to do like little ground details like grass and mushrooms, things like that. Now, I still haven't decided fully how I'm going to ink this. I'm actually kind of thinking that I might try to go and ink this a little more like Berserk. If you're unfamiliar with Berserk, Berserk is some of the finest inking you'll ever see in your entire life. It's brilliant. And I think that might be the way for me to go here. Sprague. I need you to keep it down, buddy. Okay. I'm going to leave her feet there for now. We'll come back to that area, but we're going to have a lot of details to develop around her base. And it just doesn't make sense to put a lot of time into the shoes. Later on, I want to cover the shoes up a little bit. Because this isn't a piece about, hey, look, I can draw feet. That's not really what we're intending here. So I'm not worried about making that a prime piece of the of the illustration of a focus either. You know, when we're talking about trying to pull a story, or tell a story, and pull a story together, and I think I've talked about that a few times in the stream. What I'm trying to get at isn't so much of an actual story that you've written, or even to fully that somebody sees it and they know exactly what's being said. I think that's a little much to ask of yourself. I think it's a little much to ask of anybody to be able to portray that much information just off of the picture alone. But it's about the details that you put in. There's a lot of little things that we can do on this sheet that allows us to really just communicate that there is a... Hey, Bub. Hey, Bub. I need you to calm it down and be quiet, okay? I'm on stream. If you need to, I can go into your room. Can you keep the volume down, please? So the big trick is kind of figure out early on where you want to put your largest amount of story equity. What are the key points, right? What's the overarching? What's the big story? And if you can nail the big story here is there's a little girl and there's a dragon. They're interacting. There's no negativity. There's no aggression. The dragon's not going to eat her. It's positive. It's a very open, positive scene. And so by giving ourselves the room to just slowly focus on these two stories first and then build around them, you're actually going to see that the work itself and the story itself will radiate from where we started. And that's all intentional. We started up here for that very reason. Because we wanted to make sure that no matter what, you started here when you started reading this picture. And I'm just putting a little bit of just like texture lines into her hair there, just so for myself later on, I can give myself little keys. Because in a piece that's, larger, and this is a larger piece, not physically scale-wise, it's still an 11 by 17, but with a piece with this many kind of different parts and multiple stories in it, it's really good to just make sure to use some shorthand that you're comfortable with as an artist to give yourself a reminder of why certain things are there. And so in our case, I am just making sure that I remind myself that later on, that part on the back underneath the hat, that is her hair. And just that little bit of texture there lets me know that I need to be very cautious not to overline that area. So what I'll probably do is when I see that, then I come back around with my heavier inks. I'll see that and be like, oh, I should go ahead and highlight around the hair area to draw that attention and contrast. Hey, Bub, can we keep it down, please? Thank you, buddy. Okay. There's a lot of little lines and little things that I'm kind of capitalizing on and putting marks on that weren't in the initial pencil drawing. And this is all about knowing where the different mediums can kind of highlight and show up. One of the reasons I don't go super fine details with a pencil is because when you push down with a pencil and you actually put the pencil into the paper, pencil has a habit of feathering because it's still a soft medium. It's a hard soft medium, but it's still a soft medium. And so that can often, if you try to go too hard with your pencil, not only are you going to damage your paper, which is really frustrating because if you push too hard with your pencil, then when you come back through with inks, your pen is going to follow that divot, and then you're going to see that you're going to have a jump in the flow of a line. Which, it's not the end of the world, but it certainly makes your job harder because then you have to go back and try to better involve those different details and blend them together. And that's just sometimes a little more work than it's worth. Hey, Bub, careful, please. And we're going to go ahead and do... here's a pro tip. If you're doing goggles, don't try to define the thickness of the wall of the goggle. That's just too much work, and you can do that through shadow work. But it doesn't hurt to go through and add a line on the inside of the lens holder, and that kind of indicates that there's that roundness of the lens just below the surface. It's just one of those ways of it's just communicating the intent of a piece of mechanical device or a piece of garment that just kind of helps you keep it very clean and very easy. Hey, we have her other hand here. Now, if you're joining me right now, thank you very much for being here. I absolutely love this Monday morning. Monday morning starting off some drawing is just, it's the best feeling in the world, guys. I don't know a better way to explain it. Let's see here. Hey, whoa, shh. Hey, I'm on stream. Can you keep it down? Do you want to go play in your room? Okay, well then play quietly on the couch, buddy. We need to play on the couch quietly. The morning stream is always a little more interrupted by my son because he's awake. The afternoon stream, he's asleep for his nap. So, just, for these morning streams, it's really just about us talking and putting down the initial, laying down the real initial development of the piece. The real bulk of our head line work will happen this afternoon. And it's usually just because I want to focus, and when he's awake, I've got to keep one ear out for him. And it's just kind of a split focus thing. So I hope you don't mind that. If you do, I totally understand if you prefer to stick with coming in the afternoon streams. Morning streams are just a little more freeform, a little more chill. More time to be dad. So, let's see here. We're just going to keep pushing. Okay, so one of the things I resolved early on is I wanted these teacups to be made out of the flowers from the garden. And it sounds silly, but bear with me. Think Beauty and the Beast. Think, like Alice in Wonderland is a great example of the plants being alive, and they're all kind of they're happy to be in this moment of providing tea for the guests. And I would imagine there's some kind of magic or something going on with the flower dragon. I mean, it is a dragon made out of flowers. Now, I'm going to go ahead and come in here with pencil real quick and just give myself a few initial guiding lines on how I want the bottom of the flower teacup to look. So my thing is I'm going to go ahead and they would be 2 leaves, almost like feet. And that way I can go ahead and just make it a little more, it makes a little more sense about how it would balance. And that's one of those things. There's no, you don't have to justify that, but it does help yourself as you draw if you can kind of answer questions. Try to define the logic behind your piece as you develop it, because the worst thing that can happen is you show somebody a piece and then they get stuck on the way something functions. And if you're quick with an answer and you just say, this is this, and this, and this, and this, this is why this works. Oh, well, these are flower teacups and they're alive because it's an enchanted grove, and when the little girl showed up, every time the dragon lands, the dragon kind of brings all the fauna and things to life. And innately, kind of, they just go into their mode of serving the tea party. It may sound silly, but that goes a long way into the way you draw your characters, the way you draw your scene. That kind of internal dialogue or conversation. Now, a point of note, I don't have an inside voice as a person, as a human. I don't have the internal id that I talk to. There's an interesting study out there where I'd say 60% of people in the world have an inside voice where they'll sit there and they'll have conversations with themselves and engage themselves in this whole thing. My wife is like that. Most people are. But there are those of us who don't have that. We don't have the inside voice where we have the conversations inside, and then what comes out is a result of that effort. So for me, I just kind of act and then think about it later. But sometimes what I will do is I will outwardly verbalize the intent behind something. Or, in the case of what I just explained, if I'm explaining how this stuff all works, it's because I just kind of talked it out with you and let you know exactly what my plan was. Well, us talking through that is my method of internalizing. So that'll happen a lot in the stream. If it's a little annoying, I apologize. I hope that it becomes something that you are fine with adjusting to. I'm going to go ahead and do like some of the tea spilled back. Sploosh. Thank you, buddy. Good job. So my guy's only 2.5. And he's getting, he's learning language, he's learning his language, he's learning his talking. But what's really nice is that he's getting to the point now where I can tell him things like, hey buddy, I need you to go play quietly, or I'm going to be on stream so daddy's working. And he is, he's responsive and understanding what that intent means, and then he'll go and he'll actually play quietly. It's not perfect yet, but he's 2.5. I should be pretty happy with exactly where he's at, and I'm ecstatic because it makes this whole opportunity much easier. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see this, but we've got tea kind of splashing out the back because she lifted it higher, and because she lifted it up, there's going to be some splashing and some movement. We're going to consider this as like magical tea, so it just kind of fills itself up. But now we've got our little girl. We've got so let's put a little chin line here because I don't want to make it look like her chin just like never develops. There we go. That's better. And then we'll allow her elbow and arm to kind of like create more of a visual blocker. There we go. All right, that's good. So we got her in. Let's go ahead and get our robot in. If you are joining me just now, hey guys, thank you very much for being here. If you're new to the channel, my name is Raymond Hamilton. I'm an illustrator, artist, streamer, and dad. And we just spend a couple hours a day in the mornings, and then in the afternoon we spend about 4 hours just illustrating and drawing Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So thank you very much for being here. And if you have any questions, want to throw any ideas in, or just say hi, please jump in the chat. You're very welcome. Hey, Bubba. Hi, Bubba. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and develop our robot real quick because he is super fun. He is her junk friend. She made him. No. I like the idea of the robot missing one section of the teeth, almost making it look like it's got a missing tooth, but a robot doesn't actually have a mouth, so it's just kind of like its little speaker box. We're going to give it some little round bulbs on the outside. This is kind of like to indicate an ear shape, but it's not actually an ear, obviously. So now, you're going to see me do one thing here with the robot. I'm going to forcibly place in a little bit of shading, only because it's such a unique spot that it's not affecting anything else in the piece. And what I mean by that is we already know what the lighting is in this scene. We're going to go ahead and generally define the light as being kind of up here, coming this way. And actually, let's go and do that. This is a technique that's actually really important. So there are times where you've got your scene, you've got your setting, you've got your sketch. When we're starting to put inks in, we're starting to think about light. Okay. Now we've only done outlines, and I've indicated where certain shadows are, but I haven't really committed to where our light's coming from. Let's just do that. I think it would be really nice if the light was predominantly hitting from this direction, and so I'm just going to put this guy right here. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this. We'll erase this later. It's so not important, but this triangle from here on out is going to represent the direction of our light. And the reason that's really important is because it's very easy to not, to just stop thinking about light consistency. Like, you're going along, you're working your line, you're like, oh, this is going great, but there's a certain point where you need to start finding and committing yourself to where your light is coming from. And so the reason I'm putting these arrows here is because these arrows will show exactly how the light's going to disperse. And what that means is the light is going to always hit these surfaces closest to the actual light source we created. So just keep that in mind, that as we start working and developing these inks and we start adding in more shadows, We're then going to talk about how to really keep this in mind. And every time we come to a new section, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, so which edge is going to be covered by this light? Okay, so it's going to be this entire upper area here. So that means we're going to go ahead and start shading all of this. So this is a process. We're not quite shading her yet. We're going to do all of our line work. This afternoon we'll be working on the light, defining those light areas. I just wanted to kind of set that up for you so that you understood that that's going to be a place where we're going to have to go and spend some time. And this is also not a bad idea. Anywhere where you've already done some inks, if you feel that it would be more beneficial to kind of clean up so that when you come to this later on, you have a lot less to kind of try to define, that's not a bad idea either. Hey, Bub. Hey, Bub. Can you keep the volume down a little bit? You want to take it to your room? You want to take your bike into your room? Okay. Keep it down, please. Sorry about that. Welcome to the channel. If you just joined, thank you guys for being here. My name is Random Hammer. I'm an illustrator, artist, stay-at-home dad, and streamer. And we are just working on doing the ink development for our Tea Party with the Dragon, with the Flower Dragon, excuse me. So all we're doing right now for the morning stream, because my son is awake and he tends to be a little more high energy in the afternoon stream when he's in bed, I'm going to go ahead and just keep things light. We're just going to work on outlining specific elements, kind of setting ourselves up for the afternoon stream, which will be a lot more of the heavier work into the piece. What you can see here, though, is just by adding these lines and kind of pulling out some of these pencil marks, it all of a sudden, as a center point on the page, she becomes very clearly a focus because she's prominent, she's aligned, she's solid. So this is good because use her as a benchmark. We're going to develop each section until we essentially circle our way outward. And what you're going to see is as we start circling our way outward with the ink, we're going to start defining the areas that have thicker lines and thinner lines. We're going to stay thin because it's a centerpiece. We don't want her thick and chunky. We want the visual of the details in the artwork to really show that through. So we'll just keep pushing. I'm going to keep inking on our robot. I ink with a Bic pen for this kind of stuff because I really enjoy that it's soft. And then I'll come back through with like a micron and make it really hard. If I was trying to do really clean artwork, which is to say predominantly open line, not a lot of shading, think manga, if you are a big fan of manga or anime. If I was trying to do that and then really lean into just big blocks of color, I would probably actually pen with a micron, which is something I also have here. It's like a micron pen. And micron pens are a little different, so much so is that once you put the nib to the paper, the ink just comes out. There's no way you can do to mitigate that. Now you can do a lighter line or a quicker line, and those may give you a different line quality, but a micron outputs the exact same amount of ink no matter how hard you press. It just depends on how much surface contact you allow the paper to have with the nib. Whereas with a Bic allows me to go exceptionally light on the load of ink I allow to go on the paper. And what I mean by that is that based off of the pressure you put down, the ballpoint only opens enough to let a certain amount of ink out. And so if you have enough control and you allow yourself the time to practice, by not pressing down very hard, all we're doing is we're laying ink onto the paper without scoring the paper itself. And the importance of that is that if you don't score the paper, then the ink's actually just sitting there on top. It doesn't dry immediately. And so you have a window to sit there and just drag that ink along the paper without scoring the paper. And sometimes you can use this as a slow buildup if you want to create shading and depth. Or in the case of what we're doing here, we're using it to just go ahead and create our line work. But not going too heavy because we're eventually going to go over and around this line work. Hey, big boy, what you doing? Yeah. Hey, Bubba, where's your tablet? Do you want to get your tablet? No. Do you want to put some? Is Blippi on TV? Are you watching Blippi? Yeah, we are. You know, and you'll just see, sometimes I'll put a line down with the pen and it'll look really light, but as soon as I run my pen back over it, it darkens almost immediately. I didn't put any more pressure. All I did was that second line of movement is what allows me to really just get a little more out of the Bic. Now again, go with the medium you're comfortable with, right? This is my choice because this is what I grew up drawing with. But there's no right medium. There's no wrong medium. it's kind of the beauty of what we do in this space as artists, is that part of what makes you an artist is not just about your ability to draw or paint or write. It's about your ability to manipulate your tools. And you have to think about your tools as just something that the more you use, the better you get. Sometimes a Sharpie is the right tool for the job, but what allows you to get the most out of that Sharpie is your practice that you put in with that tool. So there's times where you see somebody do something and you're like, how the hell do they do that with that tool? Well, it's because they've used the tool so much that they understand what the boundaries of their control are. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have to use a tool so much to the point where you understand what the weight and what the position in your hand and what the length of your stroke can actually be. Take a hammer, for example. A lot of people think that you should innately understand how to perfectly use a hammer to nail in a nail. And then they go to nail a nail into the wall and they smash their finger, or they hit it too hard and they puncture the wall, or they're hitting it not hard enough and the nail goes in kind of awkwardly and sideways. These are all regular experiences that the average person will feel at home. But if they went and before they hammered that nail into the wall, they went and took a board and they took a nail and they hammered 4 or 5 nails into just a board beforehand, then they went back to the wall, the process of them nailing that nail in would be infinitely better. Because they gave themselves a chance to understand the feel of the hammer in their hand, how much pressure it was taking them to hammer it into wood, and if they're hammering it then into a wall of sheetrock, then they're prepared that if they contact wood, they know what it takes to go into it. Whereas if they stay with just doing the sheetrock, if they take their time, they'll understand if they hit it too hard, they're just going to plow it right in and undo their work. They usually probably should be using a Molly. Anyways, besides that, you get my point. So, keeping in mind what it takes to get familiar with the tool you're using is just as simple as that. You just have to use it. And this is just one of the beauties of nature, or what nature did for humans. We have been given the mental capacity to not only look at something and say, yeah, I can work with that, and utilize something in a fashion that will improve the results of our efforts, which I think is the best way to define a tool. A tool is a object that will increase your capabilities of executing something you want to accomplish in a much more reasonable amount of time than trying to manually do it yourself, right? And some things you can't, like if you don't have a pen, you certainly can't draw with a pen. But if you don't have a pen, but you have, let's say like a pencil or a paintbrush or something like that, then yeah, you can still execute your idea. So it's just about right tool for the right job. Now again, you'll notice I'm not putting any shading here. We're just doing our general line work. And the reason for that is I really need to get this whole interior centerpiece done before I allow myself to commit to doing any kind of real focused detail work. Because for all I know, when I get this thing done, it won't make any sense for me to come in here and do any detail line work and shading on these characters. Maybe the scene will be so dark that I want to leave them as light as possible. And that happens, right? That is a common scenario when you're talking about working with pen. But if you go, all in, then your ability to pull lines out is very, very compromised. Now I'm not doing anything crazy here. I'm just going to put like a little dot, maybe a little line to kind of indicate this is like a gauge. Kind of a little steam gauge over his heart was the idea. I think that kind of comes across there. That'll come out more when I kind of insinuate more intense and specific lining. But all we're doing is we're trying to just make sure that we get these details kind of locked in. My big guy is being exceptionally well behaved today, so I'm going to have to take him on a really awesome walk. It's kind of cold in Oregon right now, so we're going to be bundling up. I think it's supposed to get like a low of like 36 today, which is crazy. But we are in that season. We are heading towards the winter season. For those of you who don't know or aren't regular to my stream, I had been recently let go. Just was at a studio that just wasn't really jiving with me. I wasn't really jiving with it. It was not the kind of work I like doing, and so at the end of that relationship, I started doing my streaming. But unfortunately, streaming will take some time to build. I'm not going to be able to stream full time. I'm not going to be able to make this an income-driven venture yet. I think that I'm still looking probably at like a year to a year and a half before I can fully embrace this as an income source and something I can do instead of working. So, in light of that, looks like I may have landed myself a new studio role. I'm waiting for the offer to come through fully, but I've had a few interviews. It's been really positive. But what that means is that I'm only going to be able to stream in the evenings coming up. So as soon as I get that job, I think that'll be something I'll probably, I'll definitely announce. Oh, good job! I'll definitely announce and put out there. But just so you know, if you're on the stream right now, coming up, I am going to have to shift to more of an evening schedule, which is unfortunate. I think it's a lot harder for people to participate in these kind of events because they're not going to really turn this on at home at night. But it is what it is. And as our following builds and as our artwork builds, and maybe I have a little more options when it comes to availability of income, then I will re-explore the full-time streaming schedule. Because I gotta say, I absolutely adore this. It's been pretty amazing. It's kind of a trying it on the lark, seeing if I liked it, and I fell in love with it. Actually, surprisingly, what I thought was going to be artwork first. I thought the illustration part of this would be the most important part of doing the stream. I am actually a little more interested, more and more daily, of the education aspect. Sorry if I'm turning the page around a lot. This happens. It's just always ink from your best angle, guys. If you're on digital in your painting, you have the luxury of rotating the canvas or rotating your tablet or iPad if you're painting on an iPad and not Photoshop. But try to get your best angle. Especially with pen, you only have so many times to put that line down before you've exhausted your best opportunity. And so in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the page so I can get the strongest line. We're not looking for perfection. Again, these characters are steampunk, which means they're going to be dinged, they're going to be nicked. Anywhere where you have an area where like a line isn't perfectly straight, don't worry about it. It is not that big of a deal. All we're doing is we're laying down the fundamental shapes, and then the rest will kind of come to fruition. If you're wondering why I'm putting this extra line back here, it's because I'm going to eventually have to define this big chunk of black as shadow. And that's going to be the line of the lip on the back side, because light will roll underneath that lip just to kind of indicate that that's where it ends. And that could be all in shadow, and I can still take that to all shadow, so that's not really a concern. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to do just a little bit of a shading line here, and that's because this guy's shadow from under his hat won't really be affected by the general lighting in the scene. I mean, to the degree that underneath here. And I'm going to do this just to really establish for myself a level of shading for the rest of the piece. And all I'm doing is I'm very lightly laying in the shadow here. Hey, bub, can we turn that down a little bit? Will you turn the volume down? Where's the remote? Please turn the volume down. What's it at? Turn it down. Oh, you want Daddy to do it? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, well, you turned it off. And so I'm just laying in some basic shadow here. Just to... Thank you, big boy. Thank you. Do you want to turn something on? It looks like it turned off, didn't it? You want to go put something on TV? Go put something on TV. There you go, buddy. You want to put Blippi on? Do you want to put Moana on? Yeah. Go put Moana on. Or Wanda. Oh, you haven't watched WandaVision at all in the last couple of days. That might be the choice right there. My son's favorite show is WandaVision, by the way. I've had to watch that show so many times. All right. So now we've got ourselves set up. Our robot's in. At least we've got that little shadow in up there. I'm going to keep going on the body. What you'll notice is I'm really trying to make sure that I'm giving a lot of separation between these different pieces, because when we're talking about something mechanical, everything needs to fit into everything, or everything needs to fit connected to everything. What I mean by that is, look at anything on your desk. Just look around you right now. Look at anything mechanical. Rarely do you see something mechanical have pieces that just blend into each other seamlessly. Unless it's the design intent, like that's the feature, right? You look at the monitor you're looking at. It's got contours around the edges. But there's very clearly a separation between different layers of materials. When we're talking about a robot is effectively a bunch of different materials, metals, sheets, plastic, whatever, kind of fastened together. That's the function of robotics is using the knowledge we have to create motion or create control mechanisms using mechanical or manufactured pieces. And so just keep that in mind when you're making characters that are robotic. There's no right way, there's absolutely no wrong way. But it's easier to communicate the robotic element of your character if you're thinking about the way it functions, if you're thinking about the way it moves, if you're thinking about the way that it pivots, right? Does it have a waist? Does it have shoulders? Does it have wrists? What kind of hands does it have? It's not about how good you can draw a robot. That's the last thing you have to worry about. But it is about how you communicate the way the robot functions. And he is such a small part of this picture, but at the same time, he's such a big part of this picture because he is her co-pilot. He is her friend. He is her little bot that she built. So we get to see a little bit of her personality through him. We get to see that she is just her aesthetic almost, you know? And that's kind of cool because it allows us to define something about her character that we didn't have to outwardly state. You know, we know she is somehow involved in his building and mechanic because she has the tools. She's human, whereas he is a robot. That's usually a pretty good indicator that there is some relationship there because robots don't generally just pal around with humans. So already we've developed a cool little story beat there. He's got a very intentional but almost ragtag look. What's with the big thing on his head? What's with the little sprocket that's going to be sticking off the top? What's with the little design details? Now this is a cool trick. If you have to do like a cog, you can actually really lightly just do a circle and do a circle. We're following the circle around the legs we've already laid down. And then do your cut in a little harder, and that interior line will just blend right away. It's okay if you can still see it. When we get to shadowing, it won't be that big of a deal. Hey, Bob, why don't you put something on TV? Oh, what are you going to watch? You going to watch Wanda? All right, that's a good idea. All right. So, you know, again, we're not trying to do big swaths of inking. We're just trying to start defining and really clarifying exactly what these characters are, exactly how they're sitting in the scene, exactly what their place is. And by just going about it in this kind of methodical way, we slowly start answering the questions that the page has that we haven't fully defined. What is the exact shape of this character's leg? What is the exact thickness of this character's leg? How does this character's leg actually connect? In my case, in this case of my robot, I'm attempting to just play around with some of the forms that I will need to justify as far as connective. So he's going to have little kneecaps, right? But I'm not going to make the kneecaps like our kneecaps. I'm just going to make the kneecaps a little hinge, a little joint. I don't need to show functionality. I don't need to show the way it bends because I am going to put some kind of like concentric lines on the arms and legs. And so that's going to almost think like Bender from Futurama. That's going to justify how those legs work. Those legs are effectively like mechanical tendrils, right? They have some bend, they have some give. And by going and just adding some little concentric lines like that, all of a sudden your brain references any robotic legs you've ever seen, and then your brain says that must be how that works. And then you justify functionality without me having to ever tell you how it works. That's one of the beauties of art and communicating is we are leveraging people's knowledge of what is common knowledge And if it's common knowledge, then they'll go ahead and talk about it. They'll defend it. If somebody looks at it and they're like, that's not the way a robotic leg works, I'm going to be like, aha, actually, in this show, it does work like that. And that's kind of important, right? It's kind of important to make sure that you provide at least some sense of functionality. Is the length of this hand being longer than this one a problem? Not really, because for all we know, that arm can contract in and out. That's kind of interesting in and of itself, right? Does it matter how the feet look down here? No, because the feet are just going to be kind of resting on the bottom of this mushroom. Now, he is sitting on top of a mushroom, so he is elevated off the ground. And the reason I'm drawing his feet and I didn't draw her feet is because she is actually on the ground still. And so I don't need to justify and worry about trying to make him blend into the ground below him. He's above it. So there'll still be grass cuts and stuff into the mushroom he's sitting on, but that's a separate challenge. So all we're doing is we're just making sure to communicate all the details of the feet. And all I need to see is the top of the foot and then maybe just a little bit of the rim of the sole. Does a robot need a shoe sole? Obviously not. But is this an opportunity for us to go ahead and make one more kind of mechanical aspect to this? Almost like it's like a pattern of different metal heights or different metal cubes, which is kind of cool. Yeah, bub. Do you need help? I think I hear Wanda. Did you put WandaVision on? Good job. Yeah, that's the coolest part about being a stay-at-home dad and being able to do this right now that I'm enjoying doing is that, with streaming, it's encouraged our house to kind of have a different pacing at different times of day. So, we wake him up, I feed him, and he really plays for the first hour and a half of his day, running around the house, being really active. And then I start streaming and he kind of chills it out. And then when I'm close to being done is when he's ready to go on his walk, and we go on our big old walk, and we do our lunch, and it just creates this nice kind of up and down pacing for the day, where we get a lot of stuff done, we have fun, and then I can kind of come and do this and chill out, and he gets it. He doesn't understand the reasons why. He understands that he sees me on camera. He understands that I'm doing something that he doesn't, he kind of understands the idea behind it, but it just makes it easy. I was getting a little bit of ink caught up there, so I just went and ran and scribbled my pencil. That will happen. Give yourself plenty of times to clean your nib, because in this method that we use, where we lightly press down and we don't really press the pen into the paper, what'll happen is, if you're not careful, you will get clumps of dry ink around the tip of the pen. It's because the pen will just naturally have a small buildup, and you won't always push it out when you're not pushing hard. And so by going and just giving yourself a little bit of a scribble there, it will help free all that up, push it out, and then you're back to going good. You'll notice this end up getting a little thicker. I don't make perfect circles. Barely any of us make perfect circles. Sometimes you mess your circle up, just thicken it. Make the circle shape's the most important part of that. That thicker line will go away as soon as we do some real intense, like ink work. So don't worry too much about it. We're not stressed, we're just getting our forms in. We're laying in a few little details to kind of start justifying this shape, like this one. I'm going to have it comes down, but then right here, I'm going to lift it underneath, almost so it indicates that there is, in fact, a lip on this helmet. And so because I added that line, now I can justify adding a little bit of a detail line there to kind of indicate that, yeah, there's actually some form that we hadn't previously defined. And this is what I'm talking about that slow addition of details. We don't have to nail everything perfect the first time. It's just not essential. But it is important to start thinking about the way that all of your different pieces function. Because the more you do that, the more you slowly just answer these questions and build them up and kind of do these little details, the more your piece will come to life for you and your viewer, or you and whoever will eventually look at this piece of art. So we've got our two main characters in. That's very key. They are going to be the most steampunk portion of this illustration. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start working on some of the fauna around them. Let's see, do I have any? I don't think I want to add any further details around his ears. I think I will do like a little bit of a line, just to kind of give some kind of. I'll do a line on one side, and maybe on this side I'll do like a round tie. Yeah, buddy. Yep. Watch your show. Yep. Good job. Something else you'll notice is I've gone for very non-formal fauna. I'm not going for realism here, guys. So if you're like, there's no way a single leaf sticks out of the ground like that and that size, so you're right. You're entirely right. That is okay. I made a choice early on in this piece that I was going to allow it to go a little more cartoony. And when you go that route, you really free yourself up. Cartoony does not mean silly. I mean, it can. Cartoony can mean a lot of things. I've seen very serious or very scary cartoons. It's about your storytelling. And for me, the fauna being whimsical was a very important part of my storytelling from the very beginning. I kind of decided early on, like, hey, it's important for me to make sure that the fauna itself is its own character. I want the plants, I want the grass, I want the leaves, I want all these disparate elements that are present to actually feel like they themselves could be alive. In many of the cases, I'm going to have little faces showing up on these to kind of describe that. Okay, sorry, white text. Okay, so just checking, seeing here, put these details in. I'm going to go ahead and lay in our mushroom. Now again, you'll notice that I'm doing this very light line on the fauna. The reason for that is because I don't want the mushrooms and these details to stand out as strong as the main characters. And now, if I get a line that's darker, that's not that big of a deal. There's no issue of no going backsies. I'm just not worried about that. But you might see me do a single darker line, like on the outside of these leaves, and that's because that leaf, that's the strongest silhouette. And so directly behind that leaf is the dragon. And that might be a little too much information. Hey, Bubba. Bub, can I have you go play in your room, bud? Do you want to take your tablet to your room, buddy? Yeah. Get your tablet then. Why don't you go look out the window and play on your tablet? See if any cars are coming down there when playing with their tablet, okay? All right. I am going to kind of drop in some lines that I had insinuated here, and these are going to be a lot lighter, and I'm just going to keep them really light. Could I make those more exacting? Sure. Do I really care? No, not really. So all of a sudden, just a couple lines, and these guys have a lot more form to them than they had before. Now, instead of being leaves and being flat, they've actually taken on almost like a roundness. Think of like when you look at like a succulent, those little succulents with like the little bulbs. We made giant succulents, is essentially what we're doing. The reason we approach it like this, and the reason why I'm taking this stance on vegetation, right? This could have been rose bushes, this could have been daisies, but I'm trying to insinuate that the scale of this space is not for these two characters, right? So the fauna, being as big as it is next to this little girl and this robot, indicates that they are the foreign elements to this forest. And so by allowing the fauna around them to stay large, it kind of sets the scale for the whole piece. And you start realizing that the scale is more appropriate for the dragon, because to the dragon, those are still like little bits of plants. And if you walk outside scale-wise, you look at a little bit of plant or a succulent, of course it's tiny. It's because we have groomed and bred, and we appreciate flowers, plants, and things like that to be of a certain scale to us as humans. But if, let's say, humans were 20 feet tall, the scale of our potted plants would be vastly different. We would be using entirely different plants that could grow to that scale, or we would have found ways to increase the way that the bulk of smaller plants into larger arrangements so that it felt like it took more space. Think about that. Think about if you were 20 feet tall. Look outside or look around you. What kind of plants, the plants in your house, do you think they would just be doubled in size? Or do you think that it would look different by the way we portray them? You know, this is the kind of stuff you think about when you're designing worlds, because you're the only one that can really answer that, right? It's your world. It's your piece. Now, other people's ideas, other people can look at it and have ideas and be inspired, and that's the real magic. That's what we're going for. In general, if your idea and your design and your illustration can inspire conversation about other aspects of the world you've created, you have succeeded. Because what you've done is you've created enough credibility that somebody wants to start thinking about your world through their lens of imagination. And that's the dream, guys. That's what you've done, is you've brought somebody there. And it's this foundation behind every fan character, every OC. You know, think about Harry Potter. Think about Lord of the Rings. Think about any story or character or movie that you really like. What allows people in to really start imagining in your world is when you've done a good enough job presenting such an interesting idea that they want to then create in your world. They want to stay in your world. Instead of taking your idea and running off to a world that they've designed, they want to hang in your world and partake and participate. That is the epitome of communicating your thought process and your story into a piece of art. You know, one of the fascinating things, look back at the classics, right? Go look back at classic Italian or classic, just classic art around the world. When you look back historically and you look at the greats, the Renaissances and the different great periods of art, a lot of the art that came out of that time was very much more in line with the reality of the world at the time we were in. It's not really until our time, not our generation now, but let's say in the last 60, 70 years, that we've really seen the development and the standing behind of completely fictional worlds, and those having enough breadth and quality in storytelling that they garner a wide enough audience that they then become beyond their initial medium, right? Think Lord of the Rings. Or, actually, a more recent one, think Game of Thrones. You know, Game of Thrones was a novel, and was a series of novels for years and years and years and years and years before it ever got made to a show. And then once it got made to a show, it captured a much broader, much wider audience. So much so that the prequel to Game of Thrones that's coming up is one of the most anticipated shows on streaming coming up. And if you look back historically, just look back in our history as humans, find me a culture where they had created a whole story and a whole series of stories where then that story branched into a bunch of different mediums. You know, plays, writing, illustrations, art, paintings, the whole gamut. When's the last time historically that occurred to such a degree that it was embraced worldwide, globally? And it wasn't a recreation or an alteration. And that's not to say that these things won't have that. But it's just to say that we're in a very interesting time in the world where, for once, in the history of humankind, we have the opportunity to create whatever we want, and the world is in a place enough where it can accept ideas that aren't based off reality, get behind them, and then make them something bigger than they are. And so if you think about the moment we are in as artists, historically, in this moment, in 2021, where the world's at, coming off of COVID, coming off of huge chunks of population changes and generational changes, as an artist, you probably have this is probably the best moment for you to make an unexpected impact on the world as an artist that nobody else has ever thought of, that nobody else has ever done. And the world is probably more ready to accept a new voice in a new way than it's ever been. One of my big goals, not just for this channel, maybe for, I don't want to say legacy, I hate that term, but I do feel an obligation to start developing and creating processes and ways of thinking about art that would expand beyond this channel and will expand into the artist community as a whole. I think there are some real bad practices and some bad mindsets when it comes to being an artist that are taught at the school level. And sometimes they're taught out of anxiety. Sometimes they're taught out of people not being able to separate, getting the job and making money versus the art side of it. And I think that those two things should be vastly separate. You can't talk technique and process and developing as an artist, and in the same conversation then talk making money and having a life built off it. That just they're two separate conversations, and neither of them leans into the other one properly. Now, there are certain values and tie-betweens where you can become more marketable, you can drive your art towards certain audiences. There are ways to increase your capability to succeed in the art world, of course, by as far as like the monetization part of it. But mindset, how to approach art, how to consider a piece of work or a body of work you want to create. There are so many things that require you to internalize and take a lot more thought into aligning with who you are as a person that the money conversation just doesn't allow for. None of that matters. But as an artist, that's everything. And so some of the things that you need to address and consider as an artist aren't relevant to the money conversation, and in fact can almost be detrimental, because you'll be like, well, why would you spend time doing that when you know you're not going to hit as much of an audience? Well, but that's true, but then you're not being true to yourself, And that's one thing as an artist that you have to think about. How do you keep true to you? How do you, as a creative, keep your voice? Even if you have defined your style, or maybe you haven't, that's a very common thing, right? It's a very, very common thing to feel like you don't have a style. I have for years I struggled with that, and it's called imposter syndrome. I only learned what it was called once I went and did some programming for a while, and it's talked about really regularly in the programming world. Imposter syndrome is when you feel like you're doing something below your capabilities, or you're not qualified, but you still are given the responsibility and you're still figuring out a way to execute it. And when you execute it and it's done and everything's happy, you still feel like, God, maybe I got lucky. Or, oh, maybe that just worked out, but it's not going to happen again. Like, you just can't give yourself that break, and you feel like an imposter. You feel like you're unqualified to be doing the task that's been put in front of you. That's a very, very common thing, guys. And the thing to understand about that is not that you're wrong about those feelings, because those feelings are kind of a self-moderating way of keeping yourself from over-promising on something that you can't deliver on. But it can very quickly go from that place where it's super helpful and a safety measure for yourself to where you're starting to talk yourself down to such a degree that it's actually detrimental to your success. And that's a big deal. You need to provide yourself the levity in the room to not be the best, but to always be looking to improve. All right, I'm going to add in some the lines on this tree, and then we're going to move back this way, okay? So we've kind of done a typewriter. We started left, we've moved right. I think once we've kind of established this area, we're going to kind of pull ourselves back here. We're not touching the dragon yet. We're just focusing on our characters and the scene they're in, the setting they're in. All right. Just a heads up on time, guys. We got about 30 more minutes for the rest of this part of the morning stream. After that, I'm going to go ahead and take my son on a walk, get him out for some lunch, just get out and enjoy the day, and then we'll be back, and I'll be back online at 4 o'clock. So we got half an hour. Don't need to leave yet, just kind of giving you a heads up. Yeah, this is feeling really good. I'm, as the creator right now, I'm feeling okay about it, right? Do I know how I'm going to ink this? Not a clue. I have no idea. I could come in here with grayscale markers. I could literally just scan this in and just paint over it. I don't know if I want to do that. I kind of want to explore a new style with the painting, and I think I'd be cheapening myself if I'd be I would be doing exactly what I've said that you guys shouldn't do, and I would be preemptively curtailing my own creativity and my own opportunity to do something interesting and new by sticking with something I know. And my internal instincts right now are trying to encourage me to do something I know so it can look nice. But the artist in me is saying, no, let's try something out of the norm, have fun with it. That's also an anxiety that I can introduce you guys to that I've been feeling lately, is there's this almost this instinct to try to do things that I know will look really good and just stick with the things that have been giving me views on Instagram and Facebook, and trying to curtail myself towards a really limited voice. But I've been actively trying to fight that. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, and I've absolutely gone that way on some of my work recently. But what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to I'm trying to give myself the opportunity to branch into ways of expressing my art in ways that I've never done before. Number one was putting my art on a stream and being here with you guys. Never done that before. It's been really fun, and it's been really fulfilling, and it's made me, I can tell you right now, I have never created art to the fulfillment and to the completion that I have since I've been doing it on screen. So, success. Number one, big success, really happy, really feel like I've benefited on a creative end because of that endeavor. The subject matter of this piece is actually pretty foreign to me. Now, I do enjoy doing kind of happier pieces. I also really enjoy illustrating like youth. Not necessarily kids per se, but fascination. Things that kind of spur the imagination. I've always been big on that, just as a human being, as a person. When I was like a little kid, I had imaginary friends. My mom said I had a few. And my son is definitely having conversations with somebody that's not there. So I'm just going to say he's got his own version of whatever that is to help him kind of voice his internal voice. But he is definitely partaking in some kind of interaction with something that I certainly can be present with. And no, I don't think it's anything religious or holy. I think his imagination's kicking off, and that's where we're at. I think that it's one of the great burdens as an artist, because when you're really, when you're an artist, I don't want to say you're really an artist, that's stupid. When you identify as an artist, let's go there. When you self-identify as an artist, it opens up a whole lot of expectation. Number one, if somebody knows you as an artist, and they know that you draw or illustrate or paint or write or play music or do something to that degree, they use that as a big definer of who they know you as. You know, one of the first questions people ask me is, "Oh, what have you drawn lately? Oh, what have you illustrated lately?" And that's great. I mean, that's right. That's what we want, right? You want to be known for your craft, but you also can't really turn that off. It's the same as if somebody's a writer. You know, oh, have you written anything recently? Or, oh, your last piece was so amazing. Where's that taking you? Or where did that come from? Or, you know, that becomes such a source of the conversations that you're going to have with that person, or with anybody really. And so you have to learn to embrace that, because you can't put yourself out there and be known for art or be known for a technique or a skill or a craft or a trade, and then not think that will be the first stop on the conversation trail with you that somebody else has with you. The reason I bring that up is because it can be a little bit hard to always have to be in that mode to talk about your passion. Because your passion often started when you were young. It's something you put a lot of time into. It's something you've worked really hard with. But when you also then do it for a great deal of your time, sometimes that's the last thing you want to talk about. Sometimes that's the last thing you want to have to put on the show for. And sometimes you just want to be around people you don't have to talk about that stuff. And that's where, you know, having those really good friends that know you, eventually they get so used to your work that every time you put it around, they're like, "Oh my God," or "Oh, this is great," or "Oh, I don't understand this," or "Oh, can you explain this?" Like, you don't always have to go and then accommodate the excess of communication around that activity. if that makes sense. So, in those occasions, you just have to accept that part of the way that somebody's going to get to know you is by the thing that you put out there the most in public. And if you happen to put out the thing out there that you're most involved with in public, in front of everybody all the time, then that's going to be the first conversation stop, because they know at the very least they have something they can relate to you about. Whether they really like your art, whether they dislike your art, or whether they just feel like that is a great place to start a conversation because they know it's safe ground. How often have you met or run across somebody you don't know how to start a conversation because you just don't know anything about them? You pick something like, oh, how's the weather? How's your kids? How's life? You look for something general to work your way down into a deeper conversation. So, when you put yourself out there publicly, whatever you do, art, dance, writing, reading, living, if that's your thing, you're offering somebody access to you, and you're giving somebody you're giving somebody permission to have engagement with you about that. And that's not a bad thing. It's just keep in mind that that's really what it is. That's where that source comes from. You can't really change that. And that's the way society and communication tend to work. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I think the ink here is all dried enough. I'm going to go ahead and pull out some of the pencil of the robot. I'm not worried about any smudging. The reason we worry about smudging is because, again, we're not pressing the ink down into the paper. And so because of that, the ink takes a little while longer to settle. And if you go and erase immediately after laying your lines down, you're going to notice that you're going to be grinding pen lines into the paper. And it's not the end of the world. There's nothing here we can't come back from. But it just creates more work for yourself down the road. And we're looking at minimizing the amount of work we are on the hook for doing. All right. So we've got a decent bit of illustration done here, actually. Let's clean this guy up. This is probably still a little early for me to grind out the leaves, so I'm going to leave all this stuff here. I can do the bottom leaves. That's all pretty light. And we're going to leave the tree leaves alone. All right. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and do the line work behind her in this piece up here. Got about 20 minutes, guys. So, again, thank you for hanging on the channel with me. By the way, it looks like we have a few more people on the stream. If you're new here, my name is Brandon Hamilton. I am an illustrator, concept artist, designer, stay-at-home dad, and streamer. And today we are working on Tea Party with the Flower Dragon. Just a kind of a different departure from my normal artwork. I'm sure you've been my Instagram, my social media. You'll see what I'm talking about. But this is kind of the fun of being an illustrator without any real obligations. You draw what you want, right? And so we decided to do something a little more fantasy, a little more fun, a little more accessible to all ages. And we're just kind of running with it. So yeah, that's where we're at. Let's keep pushing. Let me go ahead and start developing the structure over here. I'm going to start on her opposite side, just so when we finally get this centerpiece done around these characters, the most important part of the piece of artwork really feels complete. I also think that I'm going to go ahead and do Micron pen for the dragon's flowers and scales. Not for any specific reason, other than I think it'll offer a nice visual contrast to the Micron pen lines I've been putting in. And it might be kind of nice for us to just have a little bit of a stronger, sharper detail on those leaf/scales on the dragon's skin. Because we're going to have to communicate that the dragon is covered by all these different shaped leaves. And that the top of the head is more of kind of a flower, like a flower bloom that's blooming around the head being in the center. Keep in mind, we're just trying to find the best way to bring in details. We're not worrying about shading right now. We're not trying to go super thick with the lines. We're just trying to give ourselves as much room to create these different elements around our little girl character. The less detail around her, the more she'll stand out. Keep that in mind. when you're trying to create a character focus, when you're trying to create, maybe the character is like the centerpiece of the story, maybe they're the most important like shape in your piece, think about what surrounds the character. Because if you go too hard, you can make your character literally blend in with the background. You have to be cautious about just how many lines you put down and where you focus that story. Now in this case, it's going to be very easy to keep her and the robot as the focus, because all we're doing is we're making sure that the surrounding vegetation is too big for them. And so the scale of the vegetation already makes her and the robot stand out, because they are actually more diminutive than the surrounding plants. If you really think about the scale of some of these leaves, they are bigger than her and the robot, physically. Like just positionally they're somewhere else, but look at the size of this leaf. The size of this leaf is nearly the size of her. So just keep that in mind when you're laying out this kind of information. It's very, very easy to reinforce your main character's position and scale, but just be thoughtful. Also, if you are on the stream with me right now, I apologize about the audio. I know it is not the best in the world. I am new to streaming, and I am currently working on developing our income source. So I will be improving the sound quality of the mic, of the audio you're hearing, of the cameras, specifically the cameras. I really want you to have a better experience with seeing me draw. And I think that's going to be something that we will just naturally find our way to. I need to look into other illustrators and see what they use and when putting their artwork on YouTube and on Twitch. My system was more set up as a means to just do this and see if I could actually execute this. And now that I have executed it and I feel really good about it, we need to improve. And that's exactly what my big hope is here. Something else you notice I'm doing, I'm connecting all of my lines. So in the off chance that I do take this to a painting, like with this line work, and it's not a hard no, it's just I'm not planning on it currently, but in the off chance that I go that route, it does make sense for me to consider what's going to be necessary for using the digital tools. And one of the things that you can really do is, if you are clever about the way that you kind of close off all your lines, later on when you take this to a digital painting, you won't then have to go ahead and do a bunch of filler and cleanup if you're going to use the paint bucket tool. Because the paint bucket tool will fill any open space, right? So if you close a space with your line work, then no matter what, you can just do a paint bucket tool into that selection area, and your paint's not going to go and run out all over the page. If you're not used to working in Photoshop, what I just said may not make a lot of sense. That's okay. We're just talking about the functionality of a tool set that's very common in doing your digital painting. If you're interested in how to do that, eventually I will have digital painting videos up. I'm just not there yet. There are tons and tons of videos online on YouTube of people who are teaching how to do digital painting in Photoshop, and eventually I will add to that. But if you want to start sooner than later, I would just encourage you to go to Photoshop and just type in painting, or go to YouTube and type in painting in Photoshop, and just see some of the examples that people have pulled together of the way they approach their craft in a digital platform. One thing to keep in mind, the process of drawing in Photoshop is vastly different than drawing in physical on paper. From the relationship of the way it feels in your hand to the information you perceive back when you're drawing, the texture and the feel, you can't get that digitally. In fact, they have, like if you draw on an iPad, they have whole screens you can buy just to replicate that toothy feeling on a digital screen, so that it's a little easier to
get to that result. It makes it easier for people who are unfamiliar with drawing in that format. I smudged this a little bit. It's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of annoying, so I'm just going to pick that up. Just went a little too hard. And then I'm going to lay in the teapot real quick. Got about 15 minutes here. Just lay in the top of the teapot. How's it going, buddy? Sprague. I believe my son closed the gate or the door gate in his room, so my guess is he's stuck. So I'm going to have to go check on him here in just a moment. Because we can't have that. We'll also be going on our walk soon, so it's not that big of a deal. And I believe I hear his app playing, and that doesn't play unless he's physically touching it, so we're not worried about his safety, just curious on what he's doing. This guy up. And we're going to do something here. I'm going to use the Micron, and I'm just, in these areas that I know are going to be absolute black, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take them there now. Because a Micron, you know, when we're talking about laying in inks, it really is about understanding how to use the black. Because we're not trying to make everything super dark, spots of solid black stand out as focal points. What you'll see what I mean here in just a moment. I'm going to add the black to these characters' lines. Now, when you step back, if you take your head back from that picture, the most prominent points of contrast are those black spots I just added. So we're very careful with those. You know, you don't want to needlessly chunk in a bunch of heavy dark black, because the Bic pen is not truly a black; it's a dark gray. So the black just kind of pops. So just keep that in mind. There's a process to layering up to different ink densities and intensities. Use both there. She's got like a little bit of a leaf thing going on, or like some vines. And she's got her little leaf. Got other leaves at that. Yeah, that works. Now, even though she's like a teapot, and they're not really using the teapots, that's okay. We're kind of completing the expected set, so to speak, right? What you would expect to see when we're talking about like flowers that are teacups. And that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because we're just making flower teacups, but still, I digress. The idea is there. We're trying to create a consistency of characters and elements that just kind of share this, that tell this story. And when we get to the point where we're starting to define like the actual light sources like we talked about earlier, then it'll get really interesting. Now you'll notice I just chose to go ahead and take the micron and really outline that guy. It was because the Bic wasn't being strong enough to indicate that he was his own character. He was kind of just sitting there. You didn't quite kind of know how he went. But what I did was I went ahead and just microned him. And by microning him, he really does pop. And now I can develop the stump. Here I come, buddy. I can develop the stump, and I can develop just his little leaf tendril here. Just so he kind of has some personality. And just so we can kind of create, again, it's all about creating story for the scene. I'm going to go ahead and put in just the edge of the stump. The stump is going to be doing some really fun and interesting stuff. And, you know, with the stump, we're going to do a lot of insinuation. We're creating a lot of line work to kind of indicate that there is depth, there's like little nooks, there's little crannies. You'll notice I'm allowing the lines to be very shaky. That's because bark, in and of itself, is rough and inconsistent. It has lots of different nooks and crannies and bumps and jumps. And if you allow your pen to reflect that, your bark will feel more appropriate. So let the pen be shaky. Don't try to make it look perfect. That's not what the bark's all about. The bark as a texture is kind of wavy, and there's dips and there's divots and there's all these things. And I don't want to go into some heavy line work right away. Now we may detail the bark in some way later on that really utilizes some heavy line work. But we're not there yet. We're still kind of putting our friends on here. We have one more teacup. Okay. Had some debris there. That happens. Put my... There we are. Let's make sure to close that line. Good. Just continue what I was saying earlier about saving myself some heartache later on if I need to. Let's go ahead and put a little leaf here. A little line that goes to the bottom of this guy. Again, we're not going heavy on the line work. We're just trying to create these details to kind of tell this story. We're not worrying about being perfect with our lines. We're not worrying about if lines get too thick. We're trying to keep them minimal. You know, we don't want to overdo it, but shit happens. And if it does happen, then that's just the way it is. Go and put an eye on here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a little bit of an outline, just like the other one, just to make sure it's absolutely clear that this is its own character and not a background texture. Hey, you didn't close your door, huh? Well, color me impressed, big boy. I thought you closed yourself in. Good job, buddy. They call this making them a sticker. What that means is when you make them so crisp and clear that it's unquestionable that they pop off the page, that is what you call stickerizing a character. When you're working in ink, it's very important. It's not essential all the time. You don't always have to do it. It does not accomplish anything specific. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, Bubba. What you doing? But we're almost there. If you are just joining the stream, thank you for being here, by the way. Welcome to my channel. Unfortunately, I'm only on for about 5 more minutes. That's my son in the background. My name is Jeremy Hamilton. I'm an illustrator, artist, designer, streamer. And we've just been working on our Flower Dragon Tea Party. We are about the point we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But I will be back today at 4 o'clock. So if you're interested in jumping in, participating, and just kind of seeing what we're all about, please come back 4 o'clock today. We'll be working on this further from 4 o'clock to 7 p.m., I believe is the current goal. And yeah, we've really got quite a bit done today. I'm extremely impressed with how much we got done. So well done, channel. Well done hanging in there with me. Thanks for being here with me. Let's just add these 2 little leaves, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and close things up at that point. Just to say, got a little farther than we had intended. And also, good job to Otto for staying and letting me work on my stream and just playing quietly. Bubba, you did awesome. Do you want to go on a walk? Yeah, you want to go on a walk and then you want to have some lunch? Okay. We have to go to the store and get some shrimp. And we have to go get some ice cubes. Ice. Does Otto like ice? Yeah, he does. You'll notice I got a little thick up here in this line. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. I'm actually just diffusing it. I'm letting it kind of get a little scribbly, and we'll work with that later on. All right. And there we go. That is the conclusion of the morning stream, y'all. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the support, and just thanks for spending some of your Monday with me. I know Mondays are kind of crazy, so I appreciate you to no end. I hope you go and have an amazing day. If you feel like joining me later on, I'll be back at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And take care of yourself. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.